Welcome to another episode of Got Time with Christopher John, your scholar and gentleman in a hoodie. Rage is a necessary aspect of resistance struggle. Rage can act as a catalyst, inspiring courageous action. These are the words of writer, teacher, and cultural critic Bell Hooks. Born Gloria Jean Watkins in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, she would become known for her writings on race, feminism, and class. Her work focused on the interconnectivity of the social construct of race, capitalism, gender, and how these elements promote systems of oppression and equality. As a writer, she chose the pseudonym Bell Hooks in tribute to her mother and great-grandmother. She decided not to capitalize her name, so the focus would be on her work rather than her name, on her ideas rather than her personality. She graduated from Stanford University in 1973 and the University of Wisconsin in 1976 with a master's degree in English literature. She earned her PhD in 1983 at the University of California, Santa Cruz. She accepted a joint appointment in English and African American Studies at Yale University in 1985. She began teaching at Oberlin College in 1988. In 1989, she published Talking Back, Thinking Feminist, Thinking Black, which focused on the impact of white imperialist and patriarchal domination in daily life. A passionate scholar, Hooks was among the leading public intellectuals of her generation. She published over 40 books and scholarly articles. In 2004, she returned to Kentucky, accepting a position at Berea College, where she was appointed Distinguished Professor in Residence in Appalachian Studies. Berea College created the Bell Hooks Institute in 2013 to preserve her legacy and opened the Bell Hooks Center in 2021. Joining me at the table is a transformative leader, notable scholar, a lifelong learner and mentor who finds inspiration in the diverse perspectives from those who she works with. Dr. Robin Martin, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad you took the time to be here with us. So we're talking about Bell Hooks and talking about her work.
Yes.
And so if you can unpack for us, my listeners and my viewers, when did you find Bell Hooks?
Yeah. So I found Bell Hooks probably in, late in my studies, quite frankly, right? So it wasn't until around 2018. And so I started thinking about and studying rage as a humanist construct. I'll back up and tell you a little bit story of how I got to navigating courage. And so if you look at my logo about navigating courage, rage is in courage. Mm-hmm. And so in 2016, I was invited to the International Leadership Conference in Atlanta. And we were doing this whole seminar around healing and transformation and leadership. And before we started, and it was shortly after the mass shooting at the Emmanuel African Methodist
in South Carolina. Yes.
And it was just weeks and weeks after. So we show up at this conference talking about healing and transformation. And we asked the audience, what do you need or want from this session? And they stood up one by one and said, I just want to know, how do I become more courageous? I want to do something. And courage kept coming up. And I wrote down the word courage, but what popped out to me on the page was the word rage.
Wow.
And in that moment, I started to think, can you be courageous without rage? Without having a level of rage. And so it did get me on this journey to start thinking about rage as a humanist construct, which in turn helped me to kind of find Bell Hook and start to think about a more feminist lens of thinking about rage and the construct of humanity.
Now, I know the premise and the anchor for our conversation is killing rage, ending racism. And in preparation for this, I have to share
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
for those who are not familiar with bell hooks or this book. I just want to read this. This is a synopsis about this book. I'm waiting on my copy. It's on its way. More than 2 decades before Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement, bell hooks was declaring that abolishing racism and eradicating sexism must go hand in hand.
Right.
In Killing Rage, Ending Racism, Hooks addresses the wide spectrum of topics dealing with race, racism in the United States. She tackles the bitter difficulties of racism by envisioning a world without it, sharing a vision where killing rage, which she identifies the fierce anger of Black people stung by repeated instances of everyday racism, offers not only a wellspring of love and strength, but also a realistic catalyst for positive change. And oh, do we need this right now? Although this was written,
That's right.
a while ago,
That's right.
it is so relevant here today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's my understanding, like, the themes from this book are interwoven into the Navigating Courage framework that you do.
They are. So I take a step back, because part of the reason why rage has been so important in my journey to even get to a framework. And so when you look at Bell Hooks' work, what she opens up. So let me tell you a little bit how I got to the other part, how I knew I was raging. Right?
Okay.
Because I understood that courage and rage were connected, but I hadn't connected it to myself, right? And so I was at the University of Cincinnati, and there were a lot of things going on, a lot of injustice politically. The university had just were involved in a police shooting that resulted in the death of an unarmed Black man, if you remember.
I recall that, yes.
As that was coming out, there were reports that showed that disproportionately Black and brown people across the campus were being stopped by both university police and otherwise. And I started raging. And I didn't call it rage at first. I just knew I was angry, right?
Right.
I was so angry that I wrote this scathing letter on behalf of the faculty, and it was about the president at that time. And when I sent the letter, people thought, oh shit, she's crazy. They thought either I was crazy or I was trying to be a hero of some sort. And for me, it was neither. And so I remember my boss my white female boss taking me to lunch, because she wanted to kind of damper what was happening. You need to get quiet. I need to tell you how much this is hurting the university, that you have sent this letter. And I remember sitting at that lunch being reprimanded for my actions. What was described there is probably a lawless set of actions on my behalf. And I got indignant. And I just remembered, I thought, no, how could I not act? We have a young man that's been shot by the police. Like, we're all responsible. And I saw myself as a part of that system that was responsible for the carnage that was happening in our community. And so I got indignant. And I remember her sitting back in her chair and saying, well, because she realized I wasn't going to back off. Well, you are pretty courageous. And I thought, no, I'm not courageous. I'm just pissed.
Right.
I'm just pissed. And what that did for me is to help me to walk away from that conversation that says that it wasn't out of some act of trying to be a hero. It wasn't some act of me trying to be, that I was fearless. It was really that rage that actually pushed me to do things that seemed radical, that seemed lawless, but it was pushing on the university and its leadership, i.e. me too in that part of it, to really make a systemic change in how we responded and acted in that behalf. The last thing I'll make around that, what it did for me is help to connect both back to my research. At the time, I was also researching Ubuntu. this humanist way of leading and being.
Yes, because I remember I had a program with you and Mr. Carl Westmoreland on that.
That's right.
Yes,
That's
yes.
right. And so I started to, in that moment, so all these three things happening, the universe would have it, all these three things happening, started to help me make the connection that I was raging, wasn't trying to act like I was being courageous. I was raging, and that rage for humanity, the carnage that was happening at the institution led me to take a courageous action that seemed to threaten the people that were around me.
But I'm going to be, she didn't lie though. You were courageous. Even raising your voice for humanity, that is courage, because often you could have been silent.
That's right. That's right.
You could have been.
That's right. But what helped me when I made that connection, I started to read bell hooks. And bell hooks is saying, rage or the lack thereof is killing us. It's the one thing that the systemic racism and patriarchy doesn't want us to do. It prevents us from raging. And so what I started to connect is when we're prevented from rage, we're also limiting our ability to act in courageous ways on behalf of humanity.
Man, if somebody need to rewind that back. That's powerful. That's powerful.
So in that moment, it allowed me to own my rage. I owned it, right? I was like, yeah, I'm mad, I'm pissed, I'm all of that. And once you embrace it, so then I got on this journey of writing this book, Navigating Courage, Leading Beyond Fear. When I started to write the book, then it got me on this journey of saying, I'm gonna own it. What if we owned our rage, let it sit there, and then took action out of it? Because what was happening is that I was realizing I was raging and didn't have control of it. I didn't name it. And it was out of control, and it was actually killing me. And it's killing us in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. So once you identify it, you own it, you claim it, then you're able to use that rage constructively.
That's right. That's right.
So, and as you say, navigate it, navigate with courage.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And so Bell Hook opens the book to say that our lack of rage is killing us, and we have to find ways to own it, but also leverage it.
Well, let's get into the book a little bit,
okay.
And we talked about, even leading up to this, and I have to say this, to make, this is very, very relevant for today.
Oh yeah.
Many of us are raging currently.
That's right.
2025
That's right.
is could be the year of rage, along with many other things.
That's right.
And in preparation for this book, before we get into these chapters and whatnot, I had this, and I want to get this out. I'm looking at our current social climate. I'm looking at the person we have, or the individuals leading this country.
Right.
And I think about the last presidential elections. In the last three presidential elections, we've had two women who were candidates for that position. Yeah. And neither one of them were successful in achieving that office. And it made me think about that in preparation, because when she talks about, racism and sexism go hand in hand. And when I pause for a minute and look back on history, that is so accurate and truthful. Right. And so I want to thank you for blessing me with that book, even though I don't have it in my hands. Just doing the research led me to that. So the introduction of the book, Killing Rage, Ending Racism, they're talking about race and / rage. So what was impactful for you in that introduction, if you could speak on that?
Yeah. Well, the introduction for me, the first line in the book, like literally, she says, hold on, I have to hold on. In chapter 1, let me go back to the first line in chapter 1, literally says, I am writing this essay sitting beside an anonymous white male that I long to murder. That's the very first line, that she longed to murder. And then she goes on to tell the story and to give the context of what she means by that. And what she means by that is that she recalls the story of discrimination and microaggressions inside the airport, right? And a seat, and how her partner was actually treated poorly. And that she felt like that any white person would not have been treated in the same way. So indignant. And she was sitting there holding that rage as her partner, she's in first class and her partner's in the back, has been relegated to the coach, mistakenly, but been relegated to coach. And the white guy, knowing that was not his correct seat, happily took her spot.
Wow.
Right? And then Bell Hook was sitting by him, and she had to endure this flight with this man and her partner in the back. So she says, I'm sitting there raging, knowing that in some ways I'm powerless, but what I didn't want to do is to make him feel comfortable.
Yes.
And so he wanted to kind of dismiss and allow her to make him feel comfortable. So the introduction in of itself is really setting us up to embrace and to really take hold of our rage, to acknowledge rage as really a necessity for our own liberation. Is that it has been positioned to be something that is destructive or manic on behalf of Black and brown people. Yet the system of white supremacy in of itself is raging all the time. It's raging all the time.
It was raging on January 6th, was it not?
It's raging all the time.
Yes.
And what Bell Hook in the introduction is allowing us space to understand that white supremacy is raging, but demanding that people that are the result of the oppression not rage. And she's asking us to consider how our rage might be a critical component of our own liberation, or our fight, or a part of our resistance toward liberation.
You know, when you talked about that story and about she wanted to make sure he wasn't comfortable, that made me think about a film that came out not too long ago, and I think it somewhat got overlooked. I believe it's The Society of the Magical Negro.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it was this idea is that when white people feel uncomfortable, they leash their rage upon Black folks.
That's right.
And so therefore we want to make sure we don't make them feel uncomfortable. But that is this psychological form of oppression where it's our humanity. We should be allowed and have space to rage.
That's right.
And so,
right.
I mean, it's so powerful that we need to remind ourselves of that.
That's right.
That we have every right to garner and lean into that.
That's right. And so in my book, I actually, in Navigating Courage Leading Beyond Fear, I actually call that tending, Tending, lowercase, trying to end the needs and dilemmas of white folks. We automatically go into tending all the time. And so I talk about my professional career. So in other forms, in previous conversations, when I had the conversation with the white woman that was trying to basically chastise me for having this courageous moment, in some forms before I would have gone, well, you know what, maybe I should not. Maybe I should back up. Maybe I should act a different way. I should tend and try to end the needs and dilemmas of other folks, particularly white folks. We do it all the time. We have been trained to do it. It's so natural that when we leave. Now, what happens in this introduction is that she says, then we swallow it. We swallow the rage. So in tending, we swallow our own rage. And what happens is we self-harm ourselves further while allowing them to live a more free life. We create greater bondage for ourselves because we swallow the rage internally, which creates all kinds of psychological, mental, physical challenges for all of us, while also liberating or giving them permission to be freer than us.
So that speaks to, looking back on history, when, those times where you had those riots that were taking place, when you say you internalized. And I remember people would say, well, why are they burning down their own neighborhoods and all this? It's because it's been swallowed, that rage.
Right. That's right.
And so
That's
we
right.
hurt ourselves.
That's right.
That is powerful.
Or we take it out on each other. Yeah. We swallow it. We go to work, we show up at work, we tend to everyone else, tend to white people trying to end the needs and dilemmas of them. Then we go to our houses with our families. And then we take that rage somewhere else. That rage becomes a destructive behavior, whether we see it or not. And what she's linking somewhat in this book is then how do you attach patriarchy to that? Black men have been systematically relegated to and subjugated inside the workplace as well. They come home and society has taught them the only place that you should have control over is your house.
Right.
And so if you are out of control and you can't show your full humanity at work, and then you're taught that the only thing you have control over are the people in your family, particularly the other women in your family, that rage, that communal rage is contagious, and we keep hurting and cycling each other in different ways. And so what Bell Hook's work is doing is saying that is one level of rage that then cascades down into another level of rage within the Black family. And we have to see the interconnected between the two.
So, I mean, we have. I know we shared. There's some chapters that you want to dive into. This personally resonates with me because I've been in those situations where you're frustrated, and I'm quite sure a lot of people do this. You have this ride home.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And the ride home from your place of work is like you're trying to decompress. And I'm just gonna say part of my decompression, so that I don't bring that back into the home, has always been music for me. And recently, Robert Glasper, we were talking about music beforehand. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with Robert Glasper.
No, I'm not.
But he put out this new album. It's been out for a few weeks,
okay.
I think, or maybe a month or so. But it is the most therapeutic music.
Yeah.
And he has this song called Enoch's Meditation.
Okay.
It's 8 minutes and 8:15. It's 8 minutes and 15 seconds long. Yeah. And I just get in the car and I just listen.
Beautiful.
And it puts me in a calming place for that. But you talk about that rage, which we all have, and we need to own it. Now, you talked about the introduction, and you talked about the first. Now, the first chapter is called Killing Rage.
That's right.
So unpack that for us, like killing. So when you say, and that's the title of the book as well, is Killing Rage. Yeah. So how, I guess the question I would ask is, how is the rage being killed, or how is it being managed?
So it's not. So one of the things she makes is that the rage is killing us.
Okay. Gotcha.
That the rage is killing us, that our inability to process it or for it to live freely in the world is killing us. She also acknowledges in that our rage has also gotten us killed.
Yes.
That we just didn't wake up one day and say, oh, if I am suddenly raging, the system will kill me. There is historical proof that when Black people rage, the system has historically killed us.
You mean like if we was to storm the Capitol?
Like if we would have stormed it, well, just like the Black Lives Matter protest, just like the students protest last year against Gaza, just like every historical.
Or the protest that was taking place in California.
That's exactly it. Yes. I mean, the whole civil rights struggle was the system fighting back against our rage. If you looked at a white person in their eyes, if you showed any amount of your humanity, it warranted death. And so this is not something that has been made up. We have been trained over generation to actually thwart our rage.
So you're saying, so it's almost the idea is you're in jeopardy of being killed if you reveal your rage.
That's right.
But you're also being killed when you pull it within.
That's right.
Well.
And so part of what she is saying is that all of the narrative of rage, in the construct of a white supremacist society says then that Black rage is unacceptable. And that Black rage at all costs must not be allowed to live. And it is the very thing that maintains the system. And it kills us as individuals because we don't know where to put it, but it doesn't kill the system. In fact, it stops us from killing the system of white supremacy overall, which is raging against, I would say, humanity at large. And so in my work and what I've learned from Bell Hook is that you have to connect, for me, it's like you have to connect the three.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You have to connect the rage.
Okay.
You have to connect humanity, and you absolutely have to connect the courageous acts that it takes in order to do those, to rage for humanity.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. 100%. 100%. So, definitely I'm in the passenger seat with this, because I have yet to go through the book, and so we do have some chapters that we want to lay out. Is there a particular chapter you want to navigate to from that you want to talk about?
I don't know if it's a chapter. I'm going to read a quote. Let's read a quote, and then I would love for us to have a discussion about that, because I think it goes to what we were just talking about a little bit. One of the favorites, she said, all of our silences in the face of racist assault are acts of complicity, like all of them. What does a rage at injustice mean if we are silent, if our silence is erased by individual materials? And so she talks a little bit in this book, and I think this is in chapter 3, she talks a little bit about how rage has been leveraged across class. So, because Bell Hook talks, she doesn't just talk about, she talks about racism, capitalism, patriarchy, gender, but she also talks about class. And she talks about this class. It's a theme that's woven throughout the book to say another way in which we manage rage and against our own liberation, and how the system does that is through the capitalist structure of materials.
Okay.
And it's not just a critique of her and her education, but it's of Black elites.
Right.
Right. So those of us that are really highly educated have means. In some ways, we also have been conditioned, particularly conditioned, not to rage in exchange for material gains.
So basically saying, if you suppress your rage, you will get the house, you will get the car, you will get the 6-figure job. While you're suppressing your rage. And that makes me also think about the idea of how we live with stress, and how those stress levels impact our health.
That's right.
And so because we're doing all this suppression of this part of our humanity, and that energy has to go somewhere.
That's right. That's right.
And so it attacks our health and our wellness.
That's right. That's right. Let me, we've talked a little bit about kind of this, I would call this fiery rage. But the other connection, if you look at the word courage, and Bell talks about rage, I talk about and rage.
Yeah.
The word cur, the root word of cur, of courage, could mean heart. It does mean heart. The Latin means heart.
Okay.
Rage can be translated into cries. And so what is happening is that courage literally can be translated, courage can be translated into cries of the heart. And part of the reason why I think this is really important is because we can talk about this fiery rage all we want to that's happening in our lives because white supremacy makes us all manic, including white folks, right? But the next step, which I think is where I think as I go through all these chapters with Bell Hook, is where she's getting at is, why are we raging? Our hearts are literally crying. Our hearts are literally crying. And what I realized is I can be mad or angry about something. Angry and mad at something is a natural, rage is a natural emotion, right?
Right.
I can be mad or angry about what happens to me individually. But by the time I get to rage, it's because I see myself in the system and my heart is starting to cry. And so at some point we need to connect while we can talk about rage as this violent act and we can talk about killing rage. She weaves through the book that rage could be killing, but really is an act of love because our hearts are crying.
Yeah.
And so you think about a time, I would love to say to you, give me a time in which you have been raging about something and you could not take an action. That you could you couldn't sit on the sideline. Right. For most of us, for some of us, it could have been around Trayvon Martin. It could have been around George Floyd. It could have been around Breonna Taylor. It could have been something at work. But I want us to get to this point to where we're connecting. Our heart is crying against acts against humanity, which is why we are raging at this moment. White supremacy is an act against humanity. Our hearts should be crying, and therefore it should end.
White supremacy is an act against humanity.
That's right.
And, you know, I what that makes me think about are all our forebears and our ancestors. Right. And we talk about the freedom that and liberties that we enjoy today, that a lot of people enjoy today. And many of our forebears and heroes, they were heroes for humanity.
That's right.
And so when I think about this, so even with preparing for this, I thought about Frederick Douglass, because yes, he was a part of the abolitionist movement, but he also was an advocate for women right. and women's rights. That's he was a starch advocate for that. That's right. And so even though I haven't found anything that he necessarily said, it's almost the same idea that it goes hand in hand. But we've always been a part about moving the needle, not only for ourselves, but for everybody.
That's right.
And it was just an attack on, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Right. It's not just a black thing.
That's right.
It's a human thing.
That's right.
And folks get into it like, oh, it's a black thing, it's a black thing. It's a human thing. It's about for people, whether their sexual orientation, about if they have a disability or not. It's about their mental state.
That's right.
It's a human thing. It's not a race thing. It's a human thing. And so when you talk about that white supremacy's attack on humanity, that's exactly it.
That's right. That's right. And there is not, I was thinking about this the other day. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about, this Hispanic versus black and Asian versus black. And that this election showed that we didn't have any natural allies as you look at the polls, the outgoing polls that elected this president. There is not a single right in this country that black folk have not bore the brunt and fought for. White women don't have any rights without the liberation of black folks. You name any ethnic group that has come here, the really and truly the liberation and the human rights, any civil human rights, should go tandem hand to hand about the struggle of the Black African that was sent here in these here United States of America. You want to talk about freedom? That's what it is. That's actually what it is. But it was never about Black people only. It was human rights. Yeah. And that's what we've been fighting for. And in some ways, white supremacy has been so clever in disconnecting how those different pieces fit together. Because the system can't allow us to understand how our collective rage against acts against humanity are interconnected. Because if we really understood that, we would be having different conversations. We wouldn't have a conversation about diversity. The country is diverse. We wouldn't be having a conversation about equity. Who doesn't want the justice or anything? Who doesn't want fairness? We would not be talking about inclusion. Who the hell wants to be excluded? Exactly. But the only reason we're having that conversation is because those three little letters, DEI, has become anonymous and synonymous to anti-Black racism. And all of a sudden people think, and that's okay. Yep. But until if everyone in this country understood, and probably in this world understood, that you will not have freedom, civil rights, civil liberties, justice for all, until the Black man, particularly in the United States of America, is fully liberated. And we all, both women and men, should be fighting for that liberation. Because our freedom is tied to their freedom. Our enslavement is tied to their enslavement.
Mm. There's so much that I'm thinking about from this conversation, and I hope listeners and viewers, I hope you take these seeds and bear some work and some fruit from them. You talk about, and we've been talking about humanity, and you have this platform where you talk about humanity-centered leadership.
Yeah.
And so that type of leadership is needed now.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about that and how you have, navigated towards that, but also some of the work that you see that needs to be done in incentivizing leaders to be human-centered?
Yeah. So this work started, again, I said this earlier, during my dissertation period. So I was in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina came. And I was directly impacted. I was a young, upcoming professional. And I saw the results of when leadership worked and when it didn't work, like it did. And the long-standing impact that it has on communities, right? And I'm talking about from the state, the local, federal level, you name it. And so it got me on this journey around leadership in itself. And so when I started my doctoral program, I started looking for leadership practices or leadership theoretical constructs that would help me understand leadership better, that with this human design, because I kept thinking, man, if our leaders actually saw the people on the ground, that they didn't see refugees, if they didn't see Black people, if they didn't see poor people, right? If they could see the humanity of the people on the ground, how would they lead differently? Yep. And so I was looking for a leadership construct that actually got at that. So I started studying. And I couldn't find it. And that's when I stumbled on this idea of Ubuntu, which means I am because you are. It's a humanist way of thinking about the world. It says that you are, who you are is whole in of itself, and what you bring to this world is needed, welcomed, and celebrated. What I bring to this world in my own humanity is something that is welcomed, needed, and celebrated. I have a set of special gifts. You have a set of special gifts. The goal is to connect our gifts so that we can be better economically, politically, for the greater masses. That leadership is really about this collective communal kind of growth for the masses. So when I stumbled on this idea around Ubuntu, it really started to think about leadership in general. Like, what would it look like? Connecting that back to courage and humanity, I kept thinking, what must be present for people to be consistently and persistently courageous? Maya Angelou, there's a quote by Maya Angelou that says that courage is the highest virtues of all the virtues. That you can be kind, you can be pleasant some of the time. But courage is the only virtue that demands that you become kind and just all the time. That it's the highest of the virtues is courage. And so I started to think, what must be present for leaders to really lean into their own humanity and lead from this humanist way of leading and being? And I don't think about leadership as just leading in work. I actually say leading and being, because oftentimes we've been taught to compartmentalize our lives and the way we show up at work.
Right.
And I'm like, no. I gotta lead and I gotta be all at the same time, and they're both interconnected. And so I started to think about the background of this idea around I am because you are, navigating courage, and this humanist way of leading and being. And so I started to build this framework to say, what has to show up for me to be consistently and persistently courageous?
Yeah.
And there's 4 parts to the framework.
Okay.
The first part of it is be human.
Okay.
That sounds simple on its face. But part of the core tenet of white supremacy is to dehumanize everyone, including white folks.
Yeah. Villainize them.
It goes beyond villainize. It is to dehumanize them. If you sit in a room and ask white folks, what does it mean to be white? As opposed to what does it mean to be human? They may come up with 2 separate things. That's right. They have forgone their own identity, cultural identity and otherwise, to be white. It has also dehumanized them. They're no longer culturally Irish, Russian.
Yeah.
They have forgone their cultural heritage and who they are just to be white. It is a dehumanizing construct. Part of to justify slavery is to take a set of human beings from their own cultural, spiritual families and tell them there's something. You had to dehumanize them first to justify it in your mind and justify it in the world's eyes. So this ideal around reconstructing and being and coming back to our own humanity individually is actually a revolutionary act. Who the hell am I? Who am I past, present, and who do I want to be? Is a revelation in of itself. That's the first part. And so how do leaders show up every single day and embrace their good, their bad, their ugly? Because the other side of this, and when I go in to talk with leaders, is white supremacy has taught us also a form of that is human supremacy. I'm so good, I'm so kind, I'm so wonderful, I'm so right.
And you're not right and you're not kind all of the time.
That's right. And so what Bell Hooks, the first sentence in this book, in all of her brilliance, she says, I am a scholar, I am a great writer, I am a humanist, but sitting on this plane makes me want to kill you right in this moment. You see what I just did? I allowed her to be all of those things as opposed to saying, damn, she wrote that first line of that book. She must have been a really bad, angry sister.
Right.
I'm saying, man, she's human. So the first part of that framework is just be human.
To be human. Right. And then, so you said there's three parts. So,
there's 3 parts.
So the first part is to be human.
To reconnect to our own individual humanity. If I don't see myself, I can't see anybody else.
I'm just going to let you know, I struggle with that word. So I'm half Jamaican, and sometimes I'll throw the H's off. But, and when I say it, but that is very powerful, to be human.
To be human. If we don't see ourselves, we cannot see others. And most of us are walking around. This white supremacy has played a number on us that we don't even see our own humanity. If you can't see yourself, you can't see others. And that's part of the book. The second part of the framework talks about being community or interconnectedness. The truth of the matter is we are all interconnectedness. What white supremacy wants to say is that how you get there, and what most leadership model says, is that we are living in a world that is based upon merit and qualifications and who is supreme, as opposed to that you are very much interconnected. Ubuntu talks a little bit about this from a leadership standpoint. There is no such thing as leaders without followers.
Right.
That they're interconnected and interdependent upon each other. And I think for me, the framework says that how do you show up? You do your own work, and then you show up in community about being better and understanding that you're interconnected. Pass your degrees, pass your job title, right? If you're unhoused, I'm unhoused. We're interconnected.
Yeah, right.
On all different levels. It breaks down those silos of where we are right now and othering each other. The third part of
curious, right?
The third part of the framework is that second part is being community and interconnected. The third part is be curious. Yeah. It really gets us back to this. Being curious is really about is being critical and asking critical questions. We've gotten away from that aspect of how do we get out of this right and wrong kind of binary, but really thinking about it, exploring the different possibilities of the unlimited possibilities of knowing.
But also too is when I saw like the be curious part, I also too found it to be open to other people's perspectives. That's right. To be open to other people's lenses of how they see the world. Right. Because I'm naturally curious, I just like I want to know, well, what do you think about this? Right. With no judgment whatsoever, just to be curious about how you see the world, how you see the situation. Right. And I think that I connect with that a great deal.
Most people do. But in our current leadership structure, the truth of the matter is leaders are supposed to be right. And we take them as word as being right. And if we push back and ask critical questions, then we become the opposition. And the truth of the matter is a good leader would invite questions. It would invite rigor to the conversation.
Yes.
Because they understand that with curiosity, it's innovation. It is better. What I say during my conferences, what I know and all of my experiences is probably worth a dot on an elephant's ass. My goal is to connect my only single dot to your dot. Because you have a set of knowings that, dang, so much different and vast than mine.
And then when you connect the dots.
And when you start to connect the dots, we become better. The last part of the framework is about courage in and of itself. It is about that we all have a sphere of influence and we all have the ability to act. I think the last part of this is leadership has been relegated to a few. The way we think about leadership in a white supremacy construct is that it is held for only a few. The truth of the matter is we all have sphere of influence, power, privilege to do something. We just do. And it's our job to do.
To do, yes. We can't sit on the sidelines and we can't be silent.
So all of us are leaders in that way. You have to figure out where do you want to lead and where are you raging? What are you navigating? What do you want to take courage on?
Man, you're going to have me thinking about this all day today. So our time is running short. And so I just want to ask you, how can, if this is your first time hearing from Dr. Robin Martin, I call her Robin though,
Robin,
we pull I see her humanity, and I've always spoke often about your brilliance, and you've been a blessing to me. You've been a blessing to the communities that you've served.
Thank you.
And just exhibiting that leadership, being the example that you talked about you want other people to be. So how can listeners, viewers be connected to your work that you're doing, that you will continue to do, and what's the best way for people to be more familiar with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so you could log on to navigatingcourage.com. There's a blog that we do. We are starting next year to do youth leadership to really touch our youth in a more meaningful way. And so we also have a nonprofit called the Courage Project in of itself. But we also do cohort leaderships, like really empowering leaders in a cohort, peer learning, pushing them to think about their own individual power so that they can change, right? My goal of all of this is to normalize courage. What's happening right now more than ever is that the system will like us to believe that we are all isolated. And it would like for us to say that here are African Americans, here are Hispanics, here are Asians, here are poor, here are transgendered, here. Like they would love for us to think about us as individuals.
A box.
What I hope people get out of this and learn and take from the Navigating Courage framework in of itself is that we all have individual work together to do ourselves, that we're all interconnected. We have to get out of that siloed boxes that we're in. We have to get more curious about each other, but more importantly, we have to act. And it's not acting on behalf of one or the other. It is acting upon humanity. The power that be right now that are in control are actually against humanity. And the acts that we're feeling and the rage and the outrage that we're feeling is a result of acts against humanity, which in essence is leaving all of our hearts to cry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In times when humanity is compromised, it is critical to identify human-centered leaders who can navigate through the perils of chaos with uncommon courage. A courage that dares to challenge tyranny and fascism, regardless of how faint or bold it may be. Reimagine how you can lead and constructively use your rage to advocate for humanity. Much appreciation to Dr. Martin, my viewers and listeners. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe as we continue to provide meaningful content. I am Christopher John, your scholar and gentleman in a hoodie. Know thy history.